to Sisters in Company Talking About It live show. Hosted by me, Dr. Sharon Cradle, and Sherelle Higgins. We will be discussing intriguing, intricate, inspirational, informative, and intelligent topics with our individual twists and talents.
We will present real stories, real solutions, and engage in real talk.
So we invite you to be our company every Sunday afternoon at 3 o'clock p.m. as we focus on transcendent thinking that will move you forward. You become the company you keep. What company do you keep?
Oh yeah, we are biological sisters by way of the south side of Chicago. So get ready to keep company with us and our guests as we talk about it.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sisters in Company Talking About It. As you can see, I have a special co-host today. Sharon is not here. She is in Chicago attending the SHRM conference and, of course, visiting with family. So I'd like to introduce you to Dr. Nardis King. Welcome, Nardis.
Thank you. I'm excited.
Good. I'm excited to have you. Of course, I'm Sherelle Higgins. I'm the favorite co-host of this show. And since Sharon's not here today, I can say whatever I want to, right? I don't have her saying co-host, so I'm just going to go ahead and claim the whole thing. I am the favorite host of this show, and we're going to have some really good topics today. We're going to talk about, of course, Father's Day, and also talk about the importance of education in our children. And so, as we normally do with this show, I'm going to go ahead and kick it off with a scripture. It is Proverbs 17:6, and it says that children's children are the crown of the aged, and parents are the pride of their children. And so I thought that scripture was timely because we're going to talk about the children's children in terms of education. And then, as you all know, it's Father's Day. And so when we talk about parents being the pride of their children, it's only fitting that we use that scripture today. And so before we really kick off and talk about Father's Day, I want Dr. Nardis to tell you who she is and what her passion is. But before we do that, of course, I have to mention that she is a Virginia State University Trojan. That's right. That's how we do it. So, Nardis, you want to introduce yourself to our audience, please?
Sure. First of all, thank you and Sharon for having me today. I'm delighted to be here and talk about my passion, which is education. I want to wish all the brothers out there happy Father's Day, particularly my dad, Ron Brown, and my hubby, Stan King. I am Dr. Nardis King. I am a passionate educator with over 25 years experience working in the field of education in a variety of positions. I currently work for Baltimore County Public Schools until June 29th, where and then I will be returning back to Fairfax County Public Schools, where I worked for 20 years prior to that. So I'm excited to be here.
Oh, my hat is off to anybody who work in the education system because, you know, sometimes you just have to be honest about what you're capable of. And I know that I'm not capable of working with other people's children in any capacity. So congratulations to you on that.
Thank you.
You want to share with our audience what you were just voted as?
Sure. And I want to thank everybody who supported me as members of the National Alliance of Black School Educators. I recently was elected to president-elect, which means I will serve in a vice president's role for 2 years and then take the presidency after that. So I'm excited about that as well. It's a national organization for educators of color. Anybody is welcome to join, but the focus is educators of color and children of color, and it's a national organization.
Oh, great. That's awesome. So you see, Virginia State taught us to do great things in this world. Yes. And so we are taking our charge seriously and moving forward with it. And so let's talk about Father's Day. Of course, you know, I have my husband here in the studio who is an awesome father to the children. And so I would say that probably, well, Tasha's going to be 21 on July 21st. And so he has been a father for almost 21 years. And I think we have a caller, so we are plugging up the phone, but hold on. he has been an awesome father for 21 years. And of course, we have the little boy that's still at the house, 15 years old, who we have to continue to parent and more specifically father on this day.
And I'd like to give shout out to my husband, Stan King. We've been married now for 30 years, and he is also a Virginia State grad. Whoop, whoop to VSU.
Yes.
We have a son that's 29 years old, Chad, who is a captain in the Army and stationed in Germany right now. And our daughter, Tracy, is 26 years old, and she works for Nike out in Los Angeles. So he's been a great dad and mentor and leader of our family, and really a special father to my children and many other children through his passion of basketball.
Yes, and of course, I'd like to give a shout out to my own dad, Norman Vincent, Mr. Superfly OG. I know you've seen his pictures on Facebook. I posted today, and I post he don't use Facebook, but he likes for his picture to be on Facebook because you saw him in the studio too. So that's just how he do it. And also to my grandfather, happy Father's Day. My grandfather is 97 years old. Yes, it is definitely a blessing, and he will be 98 on July 9th. And so I always remember him saying as we were growing up that he did not want to live till he was 100 years old. Well, Granny, I don't guess it's your call. You look like you're going to make it. And so, I just really embraced the longevity in my family. I don't know too many people at my age, 52, who can say that their grandfather is still living. And just recently lost my grandmother about 2 or 3 years ago. So, and she was well into her 90s when she passed away. So I can only say, that we are blessed to have 4 generations living.
Wow, that's wonderful. My dad lives in Mount Holly, New Jersey, and I hope he's online. I called him on my way here and told him to get on Facebook Live, or at least to get on my page. His name is Ronald Brown, Sr., and he's from Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Go Eagles. And he is the matriarch of our family. Growing up, we had several family members come through our home, and my dad was a father figure to many of them, and still is the matriarch of our family. And I love him dearly, and happy Father's Day to you, Dad.
And I think we already have a caller, Sharon Cradle. I think it's on the phone. Hello, Sharon.
Yes.
Hey, Sharon.
Hello. I wanted to just call in and just say to Nardis, my sorority sister and Virginia State Trojan, that I really, really appreciate you stepping up to sit in for me today. It means a lot to me, and I'm especially excited about the topic that you're going to discuss, because I, too, am an educator, and I do understand the impact that education has on our children.
Correct. And
for the future of our world. So I just really thank you for being there today. And Sherelle, don't be so hard on her, and you are not the favorite host. You are the host.
I'm nice to the company. It's the other person that usually sit next to me. Well, thank you. Go ahead, Sharon.
I just want Nardis, if she could kind of focus on the parents, and I know you all use that scripture, so thank you for that, and just really kind of hone in on the parents' role and the importance of their partnership with the school system in terms of educating their children.
I definitely will. Thank you.
Yeah, we'll definitely talk about that, and I could talk about it from a parental aspect, because I've had some interesting interactions with the school systems. So we'll definitely get into all of that, Sharon.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm
Thank
going to log off and just listen in. So thank you all.
All right, thank you. We'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.
Safe travels.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
So, let's talk about at least one memory of our dads. One memory that I often share about my father is, as you all know, we have several sisters. It's probably more than several. And my father told one of my sisters, if you think you know all of that at 16, imagine what I know at 55. And, that just speaks volumes, because as, even when we were kids, we thought we knew everything. Right. And, the more at least it should be this way. As you age, you learn more, you do more, you know better, you do better. But, even, with my son, he think he knows everything, and I'm just like, you couldn't possibly. You only been here 15 years. So that's always a great memory that I have of my dad. What about you, Nardis?
There's lots of great
Right.
memories and stories, but because he's on, I can't tell them all. But one thing that I do appreciate about my father and my mother, but particularly my dad, when we were young, and we lived on McGuire Air Force Base. My dad was in the Air Force, and my mom was a nurse, and she worked at night. And so there was a time when we came home from schools, maybe about 45 minutes, that my dad. Me, my brother, and sister were home by ourselves, where my dad was coming home from work and my mom was going to work. And before we were allowed to go outside and play, we had to do our homework. And I remember my father teaching us how to use the reel-to-reel, those big reel-to-reels, to record ourselves to ensure that we were doing what he told us to do. And he wanted us to learn our multiplication facts, and I thank you for that, Daddy. I know how important that is in math these days, considering I was a former math teacher. And we would have to tape record ourselves doing our times tables each day until we learned them all. And so he would come home, and then he would listen to make sure that we were doing what he asked us to do. So, from a very young age, he instilled the importance of education to me and my siblings. So I appreciate him for that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's for sure. I'm scared to ask my son to video him these days and what he's doing.
It's a different world.
It's a different world. A completely different world. So good for your father.
Yeah.
I don't know if he would have been able to handle it in this day and age. As the kids, they're not scared to show their parents what they're doing, since you want to know.
Unfortunately, that is the case.
So let's switch over and talk about the educational system. And as Nardis mentioned, she's been working in the educational field for over 25 years. And Sharon worked in the educational system for probably over 25 years as well. And I've only been introduced to the educational system as a student and then as a parent. And so I think it'll be a good conversation and a good balance. So Nardis, why don't you share with our audience some of the positions you've held in the educational system, just so they can get a feel for the different perspectives you can speak from.
Okay. So I did not take the traditional path to the position that I hold currently. When I went to Virginia State University, I was a business major, business information systems. When I left Virginia State, I got engaged and went back home, and I became a substitute teacher in the high school that I graduated from for about 8 months while I was planning my wedding. And then Stan and I moved to Germany. And when we lived over in Germany, I was trying to find employment. There was nothing that I could really do in my major because, I didn't speak German, so I didn't work in the local community. So I started substitute teaching there. And the more I substitute taught, the more I really liked the field of education and was a little regretful that I didn't major in education at the time. So I started off as a substitute teacher. And then when we left Germany, we moved to Oklahoma, and I worked in the school system as an instructional assistant in a 5th, 6th grade split class. And so we had students that were in the 6th grade and the 5th grade. We had a teacher, and I was her assistant. And she really gave me the responsibility of teaching the 5th grade students while she taught the 6th grade students. She oversaw what I did. But that's when I really said, okay, I'm going to go back and pursue education. I didn't do it while we were in Oklahoma because I did have some other support staff positions. I was a school fiscal assistant. I was also a school librarian in an elementary school. Then when we moved to Northern Virginia, Stanley got stationed here in at the Pentagon, or wherever he was stationed at that point. I started working for Fairfax County Public Schools, and my first job was the principal secretary in an elementary school. And so I worked that job for about 6 months, and then I transferred to Mount Vernon High School, where I was it's called financial technician, so I took care of the money in the school. A principal, and who is still my mentor today at the time, encouraged me to go back and get my master's degree in education so that I could become a teacher, and I did do that. I went to George Washington University, and I got a master's in special education, and then I became a special education teacher, and I taught special education math to Algebra 1 and pre-algebra for about 5 years at Mount Vernon High School. And then I went back and got a master's degree in educational leadership from George Mason University, and I became an assistant principal. And I did that job for about 5 years. And then I became the principal at Mount Vernon High School, and I stayed in that role for 9 years. So I worked at Mount Vernon High School for about 20 years, all in those positions. And 3 years ago, I was promoted to a position in Baltimore County Public Schools. The position was Assistant Superintendent for High Schools. And after a year, the superintendent of that system reorged, and I became different title, same job. I supervised middle and high schools, an executive director for secondary schools, where I supervised 15 schools, 7 middle schools, and 8 high schools. And now I'm coming back to Fairfax County in the role of executive principal, and I will be working in Region 1, and there are 40 schools in that region, and we will support principals and supervise principals and be the liaison at central office in that job. So I've had a lot of positions in the field of education.
That sounds interesting.
Yes.
So that gives our audience some flavor as to the different perspectives you can speak from, and which is going to be great. So let me ask you this: what do you think is the maybe top 2 most challenges for our school systems?
Wow, 2. When we say challenges for our school systems, I think maybe I'd like to change that a little bit and say, as an educator, what would I like to see it happening in school systems? One, I would like to see that all systems around the country are offering equitable accesses for students to achieve at their highest level. And I would also like to see every child's parent, whether it's mom, dad, grandmother, aunt, uncle, godmother, be focused and engaged on the student's learning in school every day, not just when the student gets in trouble or not when the student is receiving an award, but every day. Those are the 2 things that I would like to see happen every day in the field of education. I think with those 2 things that kids could thrive and be more successful than they are today.
I found as a parent that the teachers say they want you involved, but they don't really embrace it. The school systems don't really embrace it. Even with the school system, they don't reach out to the parents unless the child is misbehaving or is not necessarily. You never get a call and say, just want to let you know your child did a great thing. They got 100 on their test. And so when there's no effort put out in a positive way, I guess that, in some regards, cause parents not to really want to participate or really engage with the system. So what do you think about that?
So, there in every field, there are people who are high flyers, there are mediocre people, and then there are people that you wonder how they got into that field. And that goes in the field of education as well. We have some people that probably shouldn't be in the classroom. But on the most part, the teachers that I have worked with in the last 25 plus years have been outstanding, caring individuals who went into the field for the right reason. As far as wanting parents to be engaged, I don't believe that there's not one teacher out there that doesn't want a parent to be engaged in their child's learning. As a parent, and I'm a parent of 2 kids, I said earlier, I think it's our responsibility to make sure that we're engaged, whether the teacher wants us engaged or not.
Right.
And what does that look like? We send our kids away every day for 6.5 to 7 hours, and we hand over their responsibility of them to people that are strangers to us, right? Now, we wouldn't do that anywhere else. We wouldn't drop off an elementary school kid at the mall and tell the person that's in, Forever 21, here, take care of my kid for 6 hours and not be engaged in that, right? When we go shopping, we take our young kids, we stay with them. It's the same thing with education. Parents should not expect that anybody else is going to care about their kid more than they do.
Right.
So when you turn your kids over to a school system, you should have expectations as a parent. I highly recommend that every parent knows their child's teacher intimately. And what I mean by intimately, who they are, what their philosophy is around education, what their expectations are for your child, and what the outcomes are going to be during that school year. You have a right to ask those questions, whether they tell you on their own or you ask them. I think it's important that, if I had a do-over, because I had to learn this along the way.
Right.
I wasn't the perfect educational parent myself. I learned things along the way. But, at the beginning of every year, I would write a letter to all of my children's teachers. In elementary school, it's mostly one. Sometimes they have more than one, whether it's the art teacher, the PE teacher. And you take time to send an email or written communication to the parent saying, this is my child. This is what I want you to know about my child. This is how they learn best. because you should know that as a parent,
Right,
Because you've been
right.
teaching them from K to 5, excuse me, not K to 5, but from 0 to 5 years old before you send them out. So you should know how your child best learns. And you should tell the teachers that, because remember, high school teachers can have up to 150 students on their caseload. It's not possible for them to call every parent every week and say, your kid is behaving well, your kid
Right.
is doing this. But they definitely pay attention to the parents who call them or email them. And if they don't email you back, then there's a chain of command that you can do, because most school systems expect teachers to communicate through email or other means if the parent reaches out. So, I think that it's really, really important as a parent that you introduce your child to the school instead of the school trying to figure out how your child learns in the midst of 30 kids in a classroom or a caseload of 150 when you're talking high school.
I think now that's great information to really, as parents, make sure that we teach the schools how to teach our kids.
Right.
That's a great point. I don't think we often hear that point, and I'm not a parent who necessarily believe that it's up to the teachers to be proactive or to be anything other than just a teacher. Well, let me not just say teacher, because that's the most important thing, but to be a teacher to my child. But what I do know, and this is from experience, is that there's been oftentimes that I've reached out to the teachers, sent them emails, and they never responded. And then when you take it a step further and you start interacting with the administrators, you get the same type of lackadaisical responses, or whatever the case may be, and it's not always a good thing. And so for me to have had that consistent experience, it speaks volumes to me. Now I can tell you that my son's first grade teacher was the only teacher in both my kids' school history who actually took an interest in him and made sure that she and I connected, and made sure that, she was more forthcoming with positive stuff about my son as opposed to negative stuff.
Right.
And I know that my son's experience as a young black man is not unique to my son. And I hear a lot of parents saying that, it's tougher on the young black boys to get through the school system than it is, because no matter what they do, they get the most severe consequences usually. And so it's sad when you think about it that way.
Right. And I think that, there is research that says that there's a disproportionality around the discipline that happens to children of color versus children of non-color, especially African-American boys. But again, as a parent, right, you are responsible to make sure that people do their job.
Right.
Educators get paid a check to make sure that they're educating children and communicating with parents. That's part of the responsibility. And if you're emailing a teacher and they're not emailing you back, and you follow up the chain, remember, everybody has a boss.
Right.
And people pay attention when you copy their boss on a communication. And, I don't tell people to, go to the superintendent right away, because I
Right.
just think that that's absolutely ridiculous.
Right.
And it happens
I
a
agree.
lot. And, don't do that.
Right.
You're sending your child to a school every day. You start with the teacher. Don't come up there with an attitude, even if your child comes home and tells you one thing. Before you fly off the handle, make sure that you get the other side of the story so that you have the full picture. Because, sometimes kids come home and tell their parents things, and they tell it based on how they think their parent is going to react.
Right.
So the story might look one way to them, but when you talk to the adults, and this is vice versa, sometimes the adults don't fully tell the right story either. But before you react, let's just make sure that you are communicating with the school to find out their side, and don't send an email when you're angry, because now you've started a relationship that is not going to, be as successful as you want it to be, because you have to remember that the person receiving that email is human too. And we don't like to receive negative things, whether it's a text message, email, or anything. It takes us to another level. So make sure that you are finding out the story, and then communicate with the teacher. Now, if the teacher doesn't know what or doesn't respond the way that they're supposed to, they have an administrator. If that administrator doesn't respond, then there's the principal. If the principal doesn't respond, there's people like me who's their boss. At some point, somebody is going to listen. listen. And what I mean by all of that is don't give up. Your child deserves to have you as an advocate at all times. And that's just not when it's discipline. That's with anything. And, I don't know how much time we have today.
We have until 4 o'clock.
Okay,
so we
good. Because, I want to make sure.
Because she on the roll. Look at her. She's serious about it, too. You see her? No, we not going to stop you. We're going to let you keep going because I see your passion all up in this. Wait a minute. Hold on. We got some comments. Kids tell half-truth. They tell the story in their favor. Okay, wait a minute, hold on. Let Nardis get back to what she was saying because she was all into this. Go ahead.
I just want to make sure, and on the most part, I'm preaching to the choir. I don't think I know anything more than you do as a parent. I've learned through my experience as a parent and my experience as an educator how to be the best person I can for my children, even my young adult children. Because we let our emotions take over, and then our emotions start guiding how we respond to things instead of come home, tell me what happened. Okay, now question your child around what they say happened, and then wait till the next day before you sit down and you write anything, because your initial thought is, that's my baby, I'm Mama Bear, I'm Papa Bear, and I'm going to go in there and you're not going to do this to my child, and the neck is going to be rolling, and now I'm on the receiving end of that, and I'm going to have I'm going to be defensive too, and I'm going to put my hands up because now you're hitting me back and forth with things, and I'm missing things, I'm not listening because we're yelling at each other instead of sitting down to discover how we can best support the child so they can learn. That's the bottom line. So, when your son comes home and tells you those things, just make sure that, you're getting both sides of the story to go. Now, was there a question behind that?
I usually don't listen to my son when he comes to school. I usually, by default, take the adult side.
Right. That's interesting because, I knew that when I was in school myself, that if I ever got in trouble, I would say, call the police, don't call Ron Brown. Right. Because Ron Brown did not play when it came to school. You go to school, you keep your mouth shut, you learn, and you do what you're supposed to do. And that doesn't happen today. Sometimes parents will write a letter to the superintendent without talking to anybody in the schoolhouse, and the superintendent is not in the schoolhouse with your child.
Right.
There are people in there that work with your child every day. Those are the people that you want to form your relationships with. The school counselor, the school social worker. There's a lot of people in the school that can give support to your child. Build those relationships, because I guarantee you, when you're nice to people, they're nice to you. When you approach people in a positive way, they're going to make sure that they're taking care of your child too. But if you come up there with an attitude, I can't tell you what might happen on the other end.
Especially after a teacher has worked a long day and dealt with all of those, behavior issues that they deal with from day to day. That's why I usually default on the side of the adult until that adult shows me that they're not trustworthy. Right. Which I've had that experience with my son's third grade teacher. And went up to the school to meet with the teacher, and when my son said to me in front of the teacher in third grade, "Mommy, she don't respect me," that spoke volumes. Yes. And from that point on, he never got in trouble about that teacher again. And I told her, don't even call me, because you're in this classroom doing something you're not supposed to be doing that a third grader would say you don't respect him. Right. And so with that, I'm going to have to default on his side, which, I still have to strike a balance with him because he is a child, right. In a third grade at that point, to make sure that he don't take advantage of a situation. Right. But the teacher lost all credit with me.
Right. And see, again, for whatever reason, your third grade son believed that his teacher didn't respect him, didn't like him. Actually, my son had a third grade teacher who I felt like treated him differently based on the color of his skin. Mm-hmm. Right or wrong, that's how I believed. But what I didn't do was allow her to get away with it. Mm-hmm. And so she was hearing from me all the time. Mm-hmm. So rather than shut down and say, I'm not going to hear from you anymore, you are emailing her, how was my son's day today? Because eventually they're going to get tired of you emailing them as well, right? And so they're going to start doing the things that they need to do to get you to stop emailing them. Mm-hmm. So your son will eventually come home and say, well, my teacher's been nice to me today, because they don't want an angry parent on their case, right? But don't ever cut off that communication.
It was towards the end of the school year. Okay. Don't worry.
If anyone else has that issue, don't cut off communication with the people who are taking care of your child every day. Don't do that, right? Make sure that they are doing their job every day, which is taking care of your child and making sure that they're having a wonderful learning experience that's going to help them reach their greatest potential.
Yeah, it's that whole schooling thing is something else. And, every time I hear any discussion around cutting funding to schools, it just drives me crazy, because I'm just like, as a taxpayer, I would love to have more of my tax dollars go to this education system, because that's a tough job. And if they don't have the resources that they need, and the whole notion that they already are being paid a subpar salary, and then they have to use part of that to get resources to have available for the children, is really just crazy to me. I have no understanding of that. So this is not necessarily a question that I think you have the solution to, but why do you think it's so easy for them to say, let's just cut the funding for schools?
I don't think anybody wants to cut funding to schools. I know that there are some competing entities for tax dollars, and the dollar can only be cut up so many ways. There are other public services that our tax dollars goes to pay for, roads and firemen, policemen, everybody who is a government employee, that dollar has to be split to pay. But I do believe that when there's a chance to, whichever way we can get more funding for school systems, we should do that. Teachers should never have to come out of their own pocket to fund their classrooms ever. I think that we need to make sure that they have the supplies that they need to do what they need to do for our children. And that's all about government, politicians, whoever is cutting the check for the school systems. Some school systems have more money than other school systems,
right?
And that, if you're living in a wealthy area that has, higher tax-paying jobs, then those school systems are going to make out more. But, I feel like if we as a country believe that education is the best gift that we can give our kids, then we need to put our money behind that. And I think that every child deserves a great education, whether they go to public school or private school. If you choose to pay for your child to go to private school, that's your right and business to do so. But I think that every child in this country deserves a wonderful, high, great experience in a public school.
I agree. It's interesting. When I grew up in the public school system, and I lived in the inner city of Chicago. And so I didn't know that there was such a thing as better school systems versus the ones I went to. And so even though I went to public school systems in the inner city, I didn't necessarily know that I was getting subpar education. It wasn't until I went to Virginia State University that I realized that the education I had received, although I was a great student and had a great GPA, was not the education that I should have been getting to prepare me for college.
Right. And, today is very different than when we were kids, right? We had to depend fully on the school system to give us what we needed. But today, parents can be the second teacher in the child's life. You don't have to be a trained educator to teach your child every day or to prepare them for the next level. Living in the D.C. area, we are so lucky because we have museums and, different kinds of activities that kids can go to learn. And, one thing that I really want to impress upon children, now that you say that and talk about what you thought you got going to Virginia State, is, we are our children's first teacher. And how we spend the first 5 years of their life until they go to the public school system or private school system is very, very, very important. Research shows that there are, kids who are in the higher economic social level go to school with a 20,000 word vocabulary, and poor kids, and mostly kids of color, and I'm generalizing, so I'm not talking about your child,
right?
About in general,
right?
Start school.
And some of y'all out there, she is talking about y'all child, and y'all know it too. So don't get all up in your feelings, because we told you we was gonna have real talk on this show. So don't act like that.
Some kids start school with a 7,000 word vocabulary. So now there's a gap in vocabulary. And vocabulary acquisition is probably the most important thing that can help your child be successful in school, because everything is about comprehension. Can your child understand what they're learning? They understand what they're learning when they know what the word means, right? And so if your child spends the first 5 years of their life never looking at a book, never seeing words, never being introduced to language, then you're creating the own achievement gap that we talk about in education. And this is something that I think I wish I would have known when my kids were younger, right? I didn't know what I know now. But my grandkids, they're going to be on point. Remember that. Because, the most important gift that you can give your child is the gift of literacy. Having them read and write every single day, just like if you have them do their prayers before they go to sleep at night, when they eat breakfast and brush their teeth in the morning, those kinds of things are habits that we create with our children. We should be creating the habit of being a literate person and reading. Whether you start reading to them when you're pregnant, when the child is in the womb, you should sit in that rocking chair every night and read them stories. When they come out of your womb from day one, you read to them every single day. Every single day. It will make the biggest difference in their educational experience when they start school. Because when your child comes to kindergarten, they are starting school with kids whose parents are doing that. So if they're doing that and you're not doing that, then these children whose parents are doing it are being accelerated through the education process through GT programs, honors programs, AP and IB courses, and your child is most likely going to be in standard level courses, sometimes with special education, because they're behind. And as soon as they fall behind, then people begin to think something is wrong with them when nothing is on the most times wrong with them. There are kids who have special needs and those need to be addressed. But a lot of times the achievement gap starts because people are not learning about children and what they need. Remember that letter I said that you write to your child's teachers, say that, my child learns best this way versus this way. A teacher has to figure that out. And, one teacher and 30 kids, these kids are at this level and these kids are at this level, they're moving along like this, and rarely is that gap ever closed. So as parents, we have the responsibility to make sure when our kids show up for kindergarten that first day that they're up here. And you do that by exposing them to things, not Facebook, not Snapchat, not Instagram, and I know we all use that, but you are exposing them to books, literature, the newspaper. They see you and your husband reading and writing every day. Those are habits that you want to create with your children, and I guarantee you if you create those habits, they will move to the front of their class when they get in school.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let me ask you this. Do you know if other cultures, let's say like, for example, the Chinese, do you think that in their school system that the kids learn Chinese? Like in our school system, kids have English class all the way through. And so do you think it's like that in other cultures? Because I'm just, like, when you think about it, it's like, really?
Well, it's important. When we call it English, we're talking about language arts, right? And it's important for our kids to learn how to read and write properly, and they do that in an English class. I don't know about other cultures.
Okay.
I guess we could probably Google that, but I'm sure they do. Everybody wants their communities and their culture and their country to be able to be illiterate. You cannot learn if you're not literate. So whether you're learning in Spanish, whether you're learning in, Mandarin, whatever language you are, I'm sure that school systems teach that class like we do as well.
I was just wondering from a logical perspective, and I'm just wondering, like, in other cultures, is that just not something that they expect the parents to teach the kids?
Yeah, but some parents don't know themselves.
Well, that's
right?
true.
I mean, you've had conversations with people, and you're like, you wouldn't want that person teaching your child, right?
Right.
So we're trained educators. We go to school to learn how to train. English teachers, go to school to learn how to be the best English teacher, math teacher, science teacher, social studies teacher, and so we're the experts in that content, and we're expected to then put that content in the classroom every day with children. So I wouldn't expect parents to know everything, although there are some great homeschoolers, and on the most part, kids who are homeschooled do very, very well on standardized tests, and when they go to the next level. I'm not a proponent of homeschooling because my kids were public school kids, but I understand why parents want to do that because, again, we're our first teachers to our children, and if you can handle that, great, but I wasn't good in all subjects, so I know I wouldn't be good at homeschooling my own children. I think that there is a purpose to sending kids to school and not just educating them, but teaching them how to act socially, teaching them how to have teamwork, and I know that the homeschool community does a lot of that with working with each other too. So I'm definitely not bashing homeschoolers because I know several of my friends whose kids are homeschooled and they are outstanding students.
So let's talk. You mentioned something that's near and dear to my nerve. Standardized tests. Like, what I don't really understand, particularly as somebody who went through the school system and now as an adult. I don't understand the purpose of these tests. And because the teachers have to now, as they say, teach to the test, it doesn't allow the teachers to have a lot of flexibility in how they can teach children. And as a result, when we had the 5 young men on the show, they talked about how boring teachers are and how teachers don't do anything to really engage them in an interesting way to make them want to learn the subject. And as my son say, the teacher sucks the whole life out of him. And so, and I've heard that, students are, not passing these standard tests and the consequences of that. So do you think those tests are necessary? And maybe as a parent, I'm not looking at it from an educational perspective.
Right. So when No Child Left Behind came about, when Rob Page was the Secretary of Education, the reason why it was put in place is because school systems were touting that, 99% of their students were achieving at a great level. Well, then when you broke those students down by subgroups, whether it's, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, special education, and students who are limited English proficiency, and you were looking at those subgroups were not achieving at the same level. So the standardized tests, I know in the state of Virginia it's the SOLs, were pretty much put in place to make sure that school systems were not leaving children behind. So that the black kids, the Hispanic kids, the special education kids, the ESOL students were not scoring here and the white and Asian students scoring up here. So it forced school systems to put processes in place to make sure that all students are being paid attention to. Okay, so with that being said, I do think standardized tests are okay. Do I think that we test too much? Absolutely. Because when I was a high school principal, at Mount Vernon High School, we had some issues around math and, you're just shooting out tests 3 times a year with kids. And when people say we're teaching to the test is made up of standards, right? So the state of Virginia, the state of Maryland, whatever state comes up with a list of standards that their kids should be proficient in by the time they graduate. The test is based on those standards. So when people say you're teaching to the test, you're really teaching to standards that are on the test. So that is okay, right? When it comes to how teachers teach that, teachers have autonomy in their classrooms to teach the content any way they want to.
Okay.
There's some superfly teachers that are, got kids singing and rapping and, fully engaging them. And then there's some old school teachers who say, I talk, you listen, and you learn. Educators are moving away from that old school way, and we want to see some project-based learning, and you want students to be engaged. So while they're engaged, you want them to do group work where they learn how to work together in a group to solve issues. It's really up to the school principal to set the standards of what a classroom looks like in their school, and make sure that they're supporting the teachers to get there. You might have a school that has 178 teachers. Every teacher is not going to be a rock star.
That's for sure.
And to be honest with you,
my favorite saying
it's
is
hard
good.
to find, teachers, not just, any teacher. We have a shortage because we don't pay teachers enough here. Teachers get sick and tired. By the end of the year, they're tired. You know how you are with your own kids. You dread summer break because they're coming home full time.
Wait. Look, I welcome summer break. I'm like, I was the last day of school. I was just like, whew. Aren't you glad school is over? He was like, yes. I said, me too.
Right, but sometimes I see people online and stuff say, teachers get off during the summertime, like they're upset about that. You should be glad that teachers get off in the summertime because they need time
to recharge,
reflect, relax, and recharge so that when they're greeting your children in September that they are giving their full self. But it's an exhausting job.
It really is.
Imagine, I have 2 kids and I was exhausted every day. But if I was responsible for 150 kids every day, all day long, I don't know how I would do it. So the teachers need that break. And when you say, well, they get off and they get paid and that, they get paid for 10 months of work, and they take that 10 months of salary and they split it up 12 months.
Right.
So don't think that these teachers are getting paid for their days off. They're not.
And even if they, wait a minute, but even if they did, why is that a problem?
Well,
because and when I take off from my job, I get paid.
Trust me, if it was enough, teachers wouldn't be working in the summertime.
Exactly.
Many teachers don't get this 2 months off that people think they do. They're teaching summer school.
Absolutely.
They're working at the mall. They're they're driving Uber. They're doing everything they can because they got to take care of their family too. So pay your teachers.
And we're still asking them to take money out of their pockets to help provide resources for the kids in the classroom.
Right. Well, school systems aren't asking them to. Those are the passionate teachers that go above and beyond to do, right? Because they don't have to do that, and they shouldn't do that. They should go get the money that they need from the school's budget. That's why the school has a budget to pay for those things.
Exactly.
But there are teachers, you can go into some classrooms and see some wonderful learning spaces that teachers just want to go above and beyond like, great people do.
Right. Okay, so let's switch, because we're not going to take a break doing this show because Nardis is on a roll. She is laying it out for you parents, so I suggest you all pay close attention. Nardis, let's talk about the school shootings. Ooh, your whole body language changed on that one.
I can tell you this. For 9 years that I was a high school principal, there wasn't a day that went by that I wasn't worried about something tragic happening in my school. And, we trained the way we were taught to train our kids to prepare for a school shooting. But, the one that happened in Florida, I saw a video on Facebook that just freaked me out. It was a student was videotaping in the classroom. He was underneath a chair. And you could hear the shooting on the outside of the classroom. And the kids in the class were screaming, ah! And I just reflected back to when I was the principal and we used to do our lockdown drills. We would tell the kids to go to the, farthest corner of the area, shut the lights off, cover up the glass on the door and be quiet, right? Because, training tells you that a shooter knows that the police are coming, right? But they're trying to kill as many people as they can in a short amount of time. So if you're quiet, then they got to guess where people are, right?
Exactly.
But the reality of it,
right.
and that video showed me what the reality it was, that I don't care how much you tell people, if somebody is shooting a shotgun outside, you're going to scream. And that's
a natural reaction.
That's happening in that class, right? So, do we have the training right? I don't think that we do. And, there is this training called Alice Training. I learned about it when I went to the National SROs Conference last summer. And it takes a different mindset to, prepare the kids, because when you're taught to tell all the kids to lock down. But if the shooter's on one side of the school, it doesn't make sense to have everybody on the other side of the school just waiting there to see if he or she is going to come to them.
Right.
Get them out if you can get out. And so Alice Training really focuses on the adult in the classroom making the right decision at that time, whether you need to build a barricade in front of the door and make sure that you're all equipped with something, so if the shooter busts in that you are throwing to distract. That's a better, to me, type of training that we need to use. And my school system that I'm in now is going to be training all of our teachers and students under Alice Training now. But it is the scariest thing when you're responsible for kids. It's a great responsibility to have. And people are going to make mistakes when those things happen, and we're so quick to say a teacher did this and a teacher did that, but you never know how you're going to respond. I'm going to tell you a funny story. If you remember when we had the earthquake here in Virginia, right?
I remember I was running down the hall with no shoes on.
Then that was summertime, right? And I had students in my school working on a summer program, and I was meeting with parents and students in my auditorium in my school, and all of a sudden the rumbling started, and the ceiling tiles fell down off the roof. And at first I thought for a minute that my football coach was crazy enough to have the football team on the roof, because I couldn't understand why this was going. And then when we couldn't explain it, more started falling. I just screamed, run, right? And so everybody in the auditorium started running, and we ran outside, and I was like, oh crap, I'm the principal. I had to run back in. I ran back into school, and I didn't know what to do, because I didn't know it was an earthquake. We didn't know, so I just pulled the fire alarm, because when you see stuff falling from the ceiling, you want people out. We hadn't been trained on that. We had every other kind of training, but we didn't have earthquake training. So, in a situation when you're scared and you don't know, your emotions take over. You just do what you think you're going to do, run. And I ran, because I was scared like everybody else. And then, I did run back in to redeem myself. But, if you have a shooter coming in the building, you do not know how you're going to respond. So if you train your kids to try and protect yourself as much as they possibly can, instead of sitting and waiting, I think we have a better chance of getting more kids saved than not. Yeah.
So what about teachers having guns?
So, I don't want anybody writing me, calling me, saying anything about political stuff.
Right.
I don't want, guns in school.
Right.
I
agree.
just don't think that guns have a place in schools. And again, if we allow teachers to have guns, they're going to have to lock them up. They're going to have to put them away somewhere so that there's no tragedy that happens. And we've seen tragedies happen around the country already where people have accidentally shot, I think a SRO accidentally shot his gun while he was doing a training lesson.
Right.
A teacher accidentally shot her. Nobody wants that tragedy there. So me personally, I do not want guns in schools. I don't think it's the right thing to do,
I agree.
Remember, teachers are human too, and sometimes kids get on people's nerves, and you don't want them to have access to something, and your child is getting on their nerves, and then they freak out. You watch videos on YouTube, you see how sometimes people snap. We don't need more weapons in place. We need smart gun laws so that people cannot get access to weapons of mass destruction who are coming into schools and hurting children.
That's exactly right. I agree with that 100%. So there are different programs in the schools. So one of them is the TAG program, Talented and Gifted. And so my son was tagged very early in life to be a part of that program. But what I found was, and even my daughter was in the math and science program, and I heard the science teacher out her own mouth say to me that, I teach the kids in the math and science program the same information that I teach the kids who are not in the program. And so at that point, I didn't understand the purpose of the program. When it comes to TAG, I know that my son was in that program. Well, I guess he's in it, Signet now. They call it Signet in high school, but he's been in that program throughout his educational career. But I haven't seen anything special about this program. Can you talk about what those programs are and what they should be doing for our kids?
Right. So on the most case, kids are identified for gifted learning in elementary school around second and third grade based on a standardized test and how they score on that test. And, sometimes they get it right, and sometimes it doesn't mean that if your child didn't score a certain score on that test, that they should not be challenged. I believe, and if I had my own school system in the world that I could create from day one, that all children would have access to the absolute best curriculum and the best teachers, all children. And that the kids who struggled, we gave them the supports that they needed to access that curriculum. Because when you start dividing kids based on their ability in the second and third grade, then you're telling our children that they can't grow to become great. And often, and this is not in every school district around the country, but often when kids are then tracked beginning in elementary school, then they remain on that track throughout high school. So if they're tagged in the third grade to start getting gifted services, and a lot of times in elementary school it's a pull-out service where they'll work some time with a gifted educator, or sometimes they're in a class that's accelerated, so the curriculum, they move through the curriculum quicker, so they have access to more of the curriculum by the end of the school year. Those kids are continuing to that track. And there goes that achievement gap that I talked about earlier, right? There's this track and this track. They're going along, your kids are following behind them, or the kids are following behind them, and again, that gap doesn't close. But in the end, when they graduate from high school, all of these kids are going to college. Well, the ones who choose to go to college. Some are going to go to the workforce, some go to the military, and that's just fine as well. But if we want every child to have the same access when they leave high school, why do we divide curriculum and say you get the good curriculum and you get the standard curriculum? Everybody should have the great curriculum, and this is what they do in some other countries. Finland is one where they don't have different level courses. Everybody's taught the same curriculum, and you give the kids who need extra support the extra support to match that curriculum. That's my philosophy, and I think that they should. Now, there are kids that, when you get to high school, they do give you choices around, do you want to take upper level courses? And if they don't, you as a parent should push your child to take a higher level course. I've had parents say to me, when my kid has straight A's, I don't want them to struggle, or I don't want to put pressure on them. You better let them learn how to struggle now while they're in high school, because when they get to college, you're not going to be there to help them struggle through that college class. So let them take, if they've never taken a higher level course and they get to high school, start with one, the class that they're most comfortable in, whether it's math, social studies, science, English. Start with at least one so that they understand the rigor that's there, because these classes have more rigor. Although all classes should, these classes definitely do. And then support them through that and make sure that the school is supporting them through that. But don't, as soon as it gets hard, say, I want my kid taken out because that A that they were getting turned to a B or even a C. A C in a higher level class where they have access to higher level curriculum and more rigor is better than a standard level class that they're just breezing by and getting A's. You want your child's mind to always working, always having to use those critical thinking skills, and they're not going to do that if they're just easily maintaining straight A's. So in your school, whatever the highest level courses are, you make sure that you're pushing your children to take those courses.
Oh, I agree with that wholeheartedly. My son would certainly be that student who would take the easy way out and be in regular classes if he could get away with it.
Right.
But
That's
I'm
our
not
job as
having it.
parents.
Oh, absolutely. I'm not having it. I'm like, no, you will take that ACE English. You will take that. He's ahead in math and all of that. Because I'm just like, no, you can't
Right.
just be at the house
College.
chilling.
Right. When they get to college, it's going to make a difference.
Oh, absolutely.
It's gonna make a difference. Yeah.
And they'll see eventually how, like you said, pushing themselves in life. Life is not always going to be easy for them. They're not going to always be able to breeze through them. And if we don't teach them coping skills as kids, they become adults without coping skills. And that's not a pretty sight.
Right.
So we have about 5 minutes left. And I want to give you an opportunity, Nardis, to talk about something that maybe we didn't talk about that you wish we had talked about.
Again, I think it's most important. Make sure that your child is taking algebra by the 8th grade. If they're in geometry, that's great. They're even way above. But by the time your child finishes 8th grade, they should at least have algebra on their transcript, because you want them to be able to access the highest level math course that's offered in the school. If you have a kindergartner and they're going to start school in September, try and make an appointment with that principal of the school and tell them to map out, if you want your child to go to Harvard, tell that principal to map out what it looks like you need to take, or your child needs to take, in their 12-year journey through education to get to Harvard, and see what they say, right? Because we sometimes as educators predetermine where kids should be, and we shouldn't be doing that. Right? But everybody, when that baby is born and you see them, I see all the beautiful pictures on Facebook, we didn't have that for our kids when
Right.
We didn't have it, right? And I love watching the journey. I've been on Facebook for about 10 years now. So those are my friends who had kids 10 years ago. We're watching them grow up, and I love it. And I see the sports that they're playing and the dances that they're doing and all of that. But I want to make sure that you're balancing all of that activity and the attention that you're giving to that activity the same with their education. Because, they can be the best basketball player in the world. And trust me when I say, I saw a lot of woulda, coulda, shoulda LeBron Jameses in my years in education. But when it came time to going to college, they were not even qualified to go to college, because you have to meet the NCAA qualifying, because nobody paid attention to the academic side. And so if you want your child to reach their highest potential, whether it's to be the next LeBron James or be the next great scientist, you have to make sure that you are preparing them that by following up with their education every day. The conversation at your dinner table every night, if people still do dinner tables, should be, what did you do today and what did you learn today? And make them tell you what they learned. Because if they spent 6.5 hours in somebody else's house, the schoolhouse, and they can't tell you something that they learned that day, that's a problem. And you should want to know what they're learning, and you should be supporting that at home. And the last thing I want to do is give a shout out to Yvonne DeColo, because Homegirl is doing STEM camps for girls, and there is a lack of interest with girls in the STEM field, and that's science, technology, math, and engineering. And we've added the arts too. Well, the girls go into the arts, but they are not going into the math and the sciences. So introducing that to them and making it fun at a very young age will, garner more women in those fields in the future. So shout out to Yvonne for doing that. I love seeing you do that, and she's a VSU grad as well.
Yes, she is. Hey,
And that's
Yvonne.
Dr. Colo, by the
Yes,
way.
it is
Yeah,
Dr.
that's Dr.
Colo.
Colo, yeah.
Yes, I love all of these black women having the DR in front of their name. I just love it. It is just, especially those that graduated from Virginia State.
Yes.
Because, I can remember when we were on the campus, as we called it, on the yard, not even necessarily thinking that, whether or not this was going to be our beginning or end of our educational careers. And so for you and Sharon and Yvonne and them to have gone on, and many more, Kathy Frazier, to have gone on and become doctors, I say kudos to you all.
Thank you.
That's a great achievement. So we have about a minute left, and I want to talk real quickly about student athletes. What's your take on those?
I think that kids should be involved in, anything extra. That's why we call it extracurricular. It makes them for balanced students, and kids who are involved in extracurricular activities are less likely to get in trouble in school because they have that coach looking out for them. They need to maintain their grades to participate, and it just makes sure that where your kids are after school every day, and there are some other things that they can get themselves involved in. So I think that it's important to have a balance. Don't be pushing your kid to stay out at 11 o'clock at night on a school night and then expect them to be an engaged student the next day at school, because then they're falling asleep in class, and then you're getting a call from the teacher saying, your kid is not getting enough sleep. Giving them enough sleep, balancing both education and extracurricular activities, not just sports, but the arts and everything else. Music is outstanding. We need to do more kids in music education. Those kids score higher on standardized test scores. So I would shout out to all the musicians in the house. But I am a proponent of that. Both of my kids went to college and played Division I sports, so I'm definitely a supporter of that.
Great. Well, thank you, Nardis. We have about 15 seconds. I want to thank you for being my co-host. Of course, this hour goes by really quickly. I think this was a great conversation, one that need to be had and one that need to be heard. And so I thank you for coming, and I thank you for not only sharing your wisdom from an educational perspective, but just really bringing it all home for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I enjoyed
And thank you all for watching.
Happy Father's Day.